All right, we're in Job 29. Job 29, Job is making he's already made his final summation of his defense to his friends, and now he's, in essence, doing the same with God. He's going to speak going to plead his case one last time, and then he's going to say, basically, I rest my case. We're not going to go in circles anymore. So, when we look at 29, 30, and 31, 29 is Job's life before all of this happens. 30 is Job's life now that all this has happened to him. And then, of course, 31 is his what is called by some his oath of innocence that says, if I had done this, then I would have deserved this. If I had done this, I would have deserved it. But he says, I haven't done it. So, we got started just a little bit last week in 29. And so we'll just read up to where we were first, or actually we'll read through 6. It says, And Job again took up his discourse and said, Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. As I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil. And so one of the things we mentioned last week was, you notice the first thing that comes out of his mouth when he thinks about what his life was like before this and what he misses most. It's God. And very closely associated to that, tucked right in there is, and I miss my kids. Right? That phrase always, I'm not going to dwell on it because that phrase, that's just a hard one. Not to understand, but it is the grief that is contained in that statement, that short statement that... I missed when God was with me. He was in the tent. We had this communion and fellowship, and I miss my kids. And, that's just... I had a lady tell me one time she had lost her husband and then ended up losing a son later. And she just... and, of course, whenever somebody's talking, I don't ask anyone anything. But when somebody's talking, I will listen as long as they want to talk. But I remember her saying, and it had been years since he had passed. She said, there's just something unnatural about it. She said, you expect to lose people along the way. She said, but there's just something unnatural about that order. And I've never really forgotten that. So you can very easily see why Job mentions them even amongst this relationship with God. They were extremely special to him, and part of his job at the very beginning of the book, one of the things he did every time they got together was he sacrificed for them. He wanted to make sure they were taken care of, wanted to make sure they were right with God. And so you can feel that sense of devastation that he feels, and that's what he misses, is that when God was with him and he would, the light of his countenance, his blessings were upon him, friendship of the tent, that constant communion and relationship that they had. When my steps were washed with butter, or the roads were washed with curds, and the rocks poured out streams of oil. These are luxuries, and it's a way of him saying when life just was full. Life was full, and that's the way my life was. And he goes on now to describe what his life looked like. So in verse 7, when I went out of the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square, the young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hands on their mouth. The voices of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. And so he's talking about his position in society, right? He had the utmost respect. The gates were where all types of matters were decided, where the elders sat. And so what he's saying is, when I went out of the gate, I prepared my seat in the square. He didn't go and, couldn't find a place to sit. Job had a seat, and it was reserved for him at all times. And when the young men saw me and withdrew, that is, out of respect, the young men stopped and withdrew themselves from his presence until he was seated. And the aged rose and stood, even those who were older than them, the amount of respect he had. You see the spectrum. The young men, they hide themselves. Even the aged, how old Job is, we're not absolutely certain, but you can see that he has respect in all directions. From people who are younger, people who are older, and certainly people who were at the same stage of life as him, he had their respect. Princes, people who were royalty, he himself was not, refrained from talking and laid their hands on their mouth. They had such immense respect for him. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. And so he had a way, there was just universal respect for him. And that's a really hard thing to accomplish. It really speaks volumes of him. Because most people, and some people hang their hat on the Churchill quote that says, well, if you've got enemies, that means you stood for something. Well, okay, and I mean, all deference to Churchill. Churchill wasn't exactly Jesus, okay? Churchill believed some of the same things that Hitler believed, okay? So let's be careful before we deify this guy. But further, Job stood up for the right thing. That's what he says throughout the book. It's what he's fixing to make very clear. I always stood up for the right thing. And yet he still had universal respect from all ages in how he conducted himself. And so what he has been able to accomplish, the bridges he's been able to build, and certainly there were people who disagreed with him and didn't always, didn't always agree with what he believed or what he did, but there was a respect there, okay? And that's what he had, and when he talks about how things have changed, it will have turned in the opposite direction. Verse 11, when the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw, it approved. Okay, so when they heard me, they heard my voice, they called me blessed. That is, they spoke well of him, and when the eye saw, it approved of what he was doing. And here is why. Verse 12, because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. I stood up, and that's a consistent theme in these 3 chapters. I stood up for people who had no one to stand up for them. I stood up for people. I did not let their cause, and you have to remember, this is not a 21st century American culture, and I'm not saying our American culture has it perfect by far with this. But these are cultures when it's extremely more difficult than what it is now. And you don't have anyone to stand up for you. Job said, the poor who cried for help, I always delivered him. I took care of him. The fatherless who had none to help, I was always there for them. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. The man who had nothing left and was at the very end of his rope, he's one who blessed me. I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I always treated her well with dignity and honor and respect and made sure that she was taken care of. And so what you see is Jesus, just that. You see, I have often said that 29, 30, and 31, what you see in Job is literally the incarnation, certainly not to the level of Jesus, but it is the incarnation of the Sermon on the Mount. Like, it's here. You go looking carefully at the Sermon on the Mount, and you start looking at how Job is described, and they're almost parallel across the board. And one of the things that says a lot about who we are is how we treat those who can do nothing for us. It speaks volumes of who we are. And I'm not just saying, people say, well, I would never hurt anyone. I'd never want anything bad to happen to them. Okay, but just ignoring them isn't much better. Just ignoring them isn't much better. We have to be willing to engage. And one of the reasons why we fail to engage is because engaging takes time, it takes energy, it takes emotion. It takes a number of different things to engage in people. But to simply make sure that, again, as we've talked about many times before, just having someone to listen to them. We can certainly engage and listen to them. And I think I've shared with you before, one of my teachers, he will always say, you know, if you pop in and say, look, are you busy? I got something I want to talk to you about. And he, regardless of what he's doing, he will always say, well, if I'm too busy for you, I'm too busy. And that's not just something he says to me, that's something he says to everybody. He makes time for people. He believes in the value of people. And I've learned a lot of things from him through the years. And this is one of those things, and it's what Job is doing. He's taking the time for the people who are easily pushed to the side and marginalized. He takes care of them and makes sure that they are treated with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. So he says in verse 14, I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban, like the headdress. And so I behaved myself in righteousness and justice. Okay. Then he says, I was eyes to the blind, feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I searched out the cause of him who I did not know. So again, you see all these vivid images. Those who are downcast by life. The blind, I was eyes to them. The lame who could not walk, I was feet to them. I took care of them. I was a father to the needy. I welcomed them in. And look, welcoming them in, there's no telling, what all was meant here, what all Job means when he says, I was a father to the needy. It could have been something as simple as, I welcomed them into my clan, gave them a job, right? Allowed them to earn a living, took care of them, just made sure they were cared for. I think about one of my favorite older movies is McClintock. And John Wayne, he's the rich cattle baron, and he comes to interact with a young boy and ends up hiring him when he learns of his situation. Now, the big difference between McClintock and Job is their morals are... McClintock was a heavy drinker. But as far as... and a womanizer. But as far as... feeling the need to help take care of people. And even the statement that he makes because the boy that he ends up helping in the movie feels bad and actually throws a punch at him because it turns his stomach that he's begging. And he says, I suppose I should have been grateful that you gave me a job. In which John Wayne quickly stops him and says, you got this all wrong. I don't give you anything and you don't give me anything. You offer a fair day's work, I offer you a fair day's wage. We both hold our heads up. Okay? You see, what he's doing in that is something that's dealing with dignity. He's treating people with dignity and wanting them to maintain their dignity, even though they were in a difficult moment. And sometimes that's one of the things that can be missing. And then he says, I searched out the cause of him whom I did not know. And so Job would have been very familiar with all the people who came to the gate. But if someone came along and they had an issue with something that had transpired, he said, I searched it out. I didn't just brush them off because they were a stranger and I wasn't going to have to deal with them anymore. I actually searched it out. I wanted to know who they were. I wanted to know if their case was legitimate. I always looked behind things. And it's easy to just kind of push those people along. So he says, I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop the prey from his teeth. That the image here, of course, is kind of like a lion that's got its prey in its mouth. And Job is saying these people who are downtrodden were like that prey in his mouth. And I went over and I pried his mouth open and I knocked his teeth out and I got the innocent out of the wicked's mouth. I did not let people take advantage of people. That's what he's saying. I did not. Job didn't like bullies. He didn't like bullies. Okay? So he said, verse 18, Then I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My roots spread out to the waters with the dew all night on my branches. My glory fresh with me, and my bow ever new in my hand. And so it's just the image of flourishing, of a tree that's flourishing. He said, I tried to do the right thing. I did the right thing, and I thought that, I thought things would work out well. I didn't really see what has happened to me coming. So he continues on. He says, verse 21, Men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring rain. And so his opinion was one that was respected. So if they're sitting in council at the gate together and they're discussing what they should do, other people might speak up, but nobody is willing to close the case down until they hear from Job. His opinion is just that respected, that we're going to listen to everybody, but we really are not going to do anything until you weigh in. And that's not just because he's rich, it's his proven track record. Okay? It's his wisdom that people want to hear from him. And again, that speaks of the vibrant relationship he has with God. Where did he learn all of this? Where did he learn to conduct himself this way? It's been his relationship with God. And so he has this universal respect. Verse 23, They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring of rain. I smiled on them when they had no confidence, and the light of my face did not cast them down. Okay? So his words, his wisdom, it was always refreshing. And I smiled on those who had no confidence, and the light of my face, that's talking about his favor, did not cast them down. When I interacted with them, I was able to lift them. Okay? You can talk about it in a number of ways. John Gordon, who is he deals a lot in athletics, meets with a lot of teams and talks to them. But one of the categories of people that he talks about are energy vampires. They can suck the energy out of a room, right? They can just suck it out of a room. Believe me, they got a problem for every solution. Don't listen to those people. Don't listen to those people. Number one, because their thinking is very short-sighted and blunted. Very short-sighted and blunted. It's not hard to sit. And my typical response when dealing with something like that is, well, until you offer a better solution, we're going to go with this. If you want to come up with something better, you knock yourself out. But I don't hear you saying anything right now. So unless you've got a constructive answer, all you're doing is complaining. and that's just not him. His face shone upon him. When you had an interaction with him, you left with just a positive sense. Positive sense of yourself, a positive sense of the world, just kind of an upbeat interaction that kind of, when you interact with people, some people will do that. They'll drain you, and other people will energize you just by being around them. Dr. Bajents is one of my teachers at school, and he's one of those people. He's been through a great deal of things in his life, but he fills you up. Like you can't, in his classes, I don't actually have to go to class when it meets online, but I do. Because I need the positivity and the energy that he brings and the perspective that he brings in a live way. And Job is just one of those people. So he says, verse 25, I chose their way and sat as chief, and I lived as a king among his troops, like one who comforts mourners. My life was good. Chapter 30, but now they laugh at me. Which again this is just so hard to fathom. When you see someone suffering the way that Job is, you laugh at him? You laugh at him. There are certain boundary lines that we don't cross, and one of them is taking delight in the demise of other people. That's a line we don't cross. Even people with whom we would strongly disagree. You don't delight in that kind of thing. If you forget people's humanity, we're in a really bad spot. A really, really dangerous spot when we forget people's humanity. The person that makes your blood boil, that makes my blood boil with some of the things they say, with what they do and how they do it, that's still somebody that is made in God's image. That's still somebody who in many occasions is somebody's husband or wife or father or mother or child. I don't know. Job says they laugh at me, men who are younger than I am. And this is in a culture where age was highly prized. And the lines of respect between the younger and the older were very big. He said, and the people who are laughing at me, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. I wouldn't trust these guys with my dog. That's what he said. These are the kids, okay, their dads I wouldn't let watch my dog. They're the ones coming after me. And so it's like the old adage, too, that, sometimes you have to consider the source. Well, so-and-so can't stand the sight of you. I think I'll live. So he says in verse 2, what could I gain from the strength of their hand, men whose vigor is gone? Through want and hard hunger they gnaw at the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. They pick stalwart and leaves of bushes and the roots of broom tree for their food. These are guys, They can't even, they literally cannot hold a job. They cannot find anything to eat. They gnaw on junk from the wilderness. These are the people who are laughing at me. What it's illustrating is just how far Job has fallen in the view of the people. Whereas before, everybody's respecting him. Now you've got the younger people, not just the younger people, but the younger people who certainly not very respected for for just the way they conduct their lives. They're the ones that are now avidly taking shots at him. He says, verse 5, they are driven out from human company. They shout after them as a thief, talking about these individuals giving him a hard time. Nobody wants to be around them. In the gullies and the torrents they must dwell, in holes of the earth and of rocks. Nobody really wants them in their community. They're not those type of people that you want as your neighbor. He says, among the bushes they bray, and under the nettles they huddle together. They kind of stick together in certain places. A senseless and a nameless brood. They have been whipped out of the land. So these are the type of people. The people that nobody wanted. They've been kind of pushed out by society not because, listen, there's a difference between being pushed out because you're impossible to get along with and you mistreat people, and being pushed out because of things you cannot help. You are blind, you are lame, you are poor. Those are different things. And he says, these are the ones that are now attacking me. He said, verse 9, and now I have become their song. I am a byword to them. I am their joke. They abhor me. They keep aloof from me, and they do not hesitate to spit at the sight of me. Or some translations read, and it is certainly a very plausible translation, they do not hesitate to spit in my face. Spitting, is, especially in Middle Eastern cultures, even to this day, even in our culture. I'm not talking about, look, we're out on the baseball field and we're spitting, okay? People are like, that's gross. Why do you do that? When it's 100 degrees and you're wearing long pants and a shirt and all kinds of stuff and sweat is pouring off, look, let the boy spit and leave him alone. It's fine. It's not like at a dinner party where he's spitting over here on the hardwood. Let him spit. But the spit under discussion here is a spit of derision, to spit on someone, to spit at someone. Pretty low. And it shows just how little you think of them. Even in pro sports, the other night, a guy was ejected for spitting in the face of another player. Like, we still get that. Like, that, even though it's, that's something that's almost universally recognized as just, that's just a line you don't cross. It's just something you don't do. He says, but because God, they spit at me or spit at the sight of me because God has loosed my cord and humbled me, and they have cast off restraint in my presence. You see, they never would have done this before, but they do it now. Which, by the way, is the essence of a coward. You will only take your shots, you'll only do your things when you're sure that he doesn't have the upper hand and you won't face retribution. Verse 12, on my right hand the rabble rise, they push away my feet and cast up against me their ways of destruction. This could be a poetic way of simply saying they mistreat him, or it could be literally taken as they push away his feet, and so the idea would be that when he gets up to kind of walk and move, they kind of come up behind him and catch his foot and jerk his leg out from under him, and he falls down. Which, if that's what it is, that's just, you got to be a sick human being to do that. To somebody who is so definitely emaciated and just completely ravaged in a body, had to be nothing but skin and bones, and the skin and bones covered in scars and boils and everything else. And then when he finally can get himself up to amble along, and then you pull his leg out from under him and make him fall on his face. He says, verse 13, they break up my path and they promote my calamity. They need no one to help them, and as through the wide breach they come, amid the crash they roll on. Terrors are turned upon me, my honor is pursued as by the wind, and my prosperity has passed away like a cloud. Everything has completely left. I am left with absolutely nothing. And so in verse 16 he says, and now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction have taken hold of me. My soul is poured out within me. Everything just kind of keeps playing on a loop. I mean, that's what happens when bad things happen or when we struggle with stuff. It's like a constant loop in our heads, right? It's like a video or a ticking message that we can continue to see, and no matter how many times we think about it, it just makes its loop and comes right back around. And it's tough and it's annoying. That's what he's saying. Then he says, so mentally he's just exhausted. He doesn't get any rest mentally. He says, the night racks my bones, and the pain gnaws me, and the pain that gnaws me takes no rest. And so even at night, and we've already seen this, he would go to sleep, but then he would have terrible nightmares. And here the pain that comes with, a lot of us, we at least get the relief of, I'm going to fall in this bed and just forget about some things for a while. He doesn't get that. With great force, my garment is disfigured. It binds me about like the collar of my tunic. God has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. Okay? So, it's like my honor has been used as a noose around me, and God just throws me into the muck, throws me into the mud, and it's like I'm worthless. And he says, and I cry to you for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you only look at me. And that's rough. He looks at God and says, here I am. I got nothing left. I pour it all out in front of you. I cry to you, and you just look at me. You won't talk to me. Why won't you talk to me? Look, I know God has spoken through His Word. I don't doubt that. I don't challenge that. I don't challenge His wisdom. I don't challenge anything. But just be honest. Aren't there times when you're going through things where you wish, God, you don't even have to talk. Just look at me and go. Or, like, that's all I want. I wish you'd just give me that. Either tell me I'm doing it the way that you want me to, nod and say I'm doing it the way you want me to, or look at me and shake my head and send me back to the drawing board. Just give me something. Job says, all you do is look at me. You have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me. So when he looks at God, he's not hurling accusations of being angry and accusing God and all. He can't figure it out. It's very similar to what we read in the Psalms, and that's what he's saying. It just feels like you just turned so cruel to me. I don't understand. And so that's where he is. That's how far he's fallen. We'll hit the pause button right there, and then we'll pick up next week looking at this and then looking at his oath of clearance.